Tina always admired Brad from afar, even though they were in the same pack. Brad was the alpha, the leader of their group of 4, and Tina knew he carried the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. But as much as she was drawn to his strength, his charisma, there was something always unspoken between them. They lived like college students, going to parties, attending lectures, and leading what seemed like normal lives. But whenever any challenge came their way, their true nature as shapeshifter werewolves emerged, fierce and loyal. Despite their bond in battle, Tina felt increasingly invisible to Brad. Their last conversation had been tense, a jumble of frustration and hurt feelings. She had accused him of ignoring her, of never truly seeing her. Brad, for all his power, had stumbled over his words. He had never told her he loved her, but in his heart, Tina was the only one he wanted. Yet, the words never came. The next day, a rival group challenged them. As always, Brad led them to victory. But when the fight was over, Brad was gone. His pack searched everywhere, but no trace of him remained. Weeks passed, and they began to believe the worst, that Brad had perished in the battle. Tina was devastated. She had lost not only her leader, but the love she had never been brave enough to confess to. Her world, already fragile, crumbled around her. The grief was suffocating, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the sense of emptiness. Each day bled into the next, with no sign of recovery. Jason appeared in Tina's life like a flicker of light, but she wasn't ready to let anyone in. He was charming, attentive, always finding ways to make her laugh, but her heart was still with Brad. Jason saved her from an unexpected attack one night. An enemy from another pack had targeted her when she was at her weakest, and from that moment, Jason and Tina began to form a friendship. As their friendship grew, Jason's feelings deepened. He wanted to be more than just a friend, but Tina was torn. She couldn't give him her heart, not while Brad's memory still haunted her every move. Yet Jason persisted, and soon they were spending more time together, going to parties, attending classes, and trying to piece together something that resembled happiness. But no matter how close they became, Jason couldn't fill the void left by Brad. He was kind, supportive, and everything Tina should have wanted, yet she couldn't bring herself to love him in the same way. Brad's presence, though gone, lingered. Then, tragedy struck again. A new pack entered the city, ruthless and bloodthirsty. They ambushed Tina's parents, both shapeshifters, and slaughtered them without mercy. The loss was unbearable. Tina, already fragile from losing Brad, spiraled into a deep depression. She locked herself away, unable to face the world. The police called her the next day with shocking news. The group that attacked her family had young members, and one of them was named Brad. Tina's mind raced. Could it be? Was the Brad she loved capable of such a brutal act? Her grief turned to rage. If Brad was alive and had betrayed her in this way, she would make him pay. Jason tried to help her find Brad, but no matter how hard they searched, they couldn't locate him. Days passed in a blur of anger and frustration, and then, Brad returned. Brad showed up one evening, out of the blue. His clothes were torn, his face pale, but he was alive. He explained that the rival pack had taken him captive during the battle, and he had barely escaped. He had fought his way back to her, only to find that she was no longer the same. But Tina wasn't interested in his story. She attacked him, fueled by the belief that he had betrayed her and killed her parents. Brad didn't fight back. He dodged her blows, confused and heartbroken. He didn't understand why she had turned against him. Later, Brad pieced together the truth. Tina believed he was part of the group that killed her parents. He vowed to clear his name and began collecting evidence to prove his innocence. Just when Brad was close to uncovering the truth, another man named Brad attacked Tina as she walked home. The real Brad, who had been following her, intervened and saved her. But even then, Tina lashed out at him, convinced he was her enemy. "How did you know?" she demanded, her eyes blazing. "How did you know they attacked my parents unless you were there?" Brad fled, heart heavy. Tina was lost to him. Tina, now fully believing Brad was guilty, asked Jason to help her trap him. Jason, ever loyal, agreed. They tracked Brad, finding his hideout and setting their trap. When Brad finally approached Tina's house, ready to show her the proof of his innocence, Jason and Tina ambushed him. Brad didn't fight back. He tried to reason with Tina, but she wouldn't listen. They took him prisoner, locking him in a cage made of materials impossible for even a shapeshifter to break. Tina administered electric shocks, trying to make him confess, but Brad held on, insisting on his innocence. Then the rival pack, the true culprits, broke into the house. They attacked Tina and Jason. Tina fought bravely, but she was overwhelmed. It was then that she realized the truth. The pack leader taunted her, revealing their role in her parents' deaths. In that moment, Tina's world shattered. Brad had never betrayed her. With her last ounce of strength, Tina tried to free Brad, but she was captured and taken away by the rival pack. Brad, using every ounce of his power, broke free from the cage and set off in search of Tina. He tracked her through the dark forests where their kind hid. Eventually, he found her, but it was a trap. The rival pack caged him once more, dragging him to their lair. Jason, however, had gathered his own group. He arrived just in time to save them both. Together, Brad, Tina, and Jason fought the rival pack, finally defeating them in an epic battle that left them all exhausted and wounded. When the fight was over, Jason kissed Tina. She didn't stop him, but the kiss felt wrong. Brad, seeing this, walked away, his heart heavy. He thought Tina had chosen Jason over him. Tina returned home, confused and conflicted. The next day, she decided to tell Brad how she felt, to clear the air once and for all. But when she arrived at college, she learned that Brad had left. He and his family had moved to another city. Once again, Tina's heart broke. Jason, ever the loyal friend, proposed to Tina, but Tina hesitated. Jason was a good man, and he had stood by her side when she needed him most. But her heart still belonged to Brad. She asked Jason for time, unsure of what to do. Months passed. Tina and Jason continued their friendship, even enrolling at the same university. They spent time together, but there was always a distance between them. One day, on a trip to the beach, they saw a man playing with children in the sand. His beard was long, his hair unkempt, but something about him caught Tina's eye. When the man turned and saw her, he called out her name, running toward her like a child. A little boy came up to her, apologizing for the man's behavior. "He's not well," the boy explained. "He calls every woman Tina." But Tina knew, even before she looked into his eyes. It was Brad. Her Brad. She ran to him, wrapping her arms around him, and held him tight. After everything they had been through, she had found him again. It was a crisp fall morning when Sarah, along with her younger brother Matthew, set foot on the college campus for the first time. The air was fresh with possibility, yet Sarah felt a familiar unease in the pit of her stomach. Being an introvert made it hard for her to find her place among the lively bustle of students, most of whom already formed their cliques. Matthew, on the other hand, despite being just a year younger than Sarah, was more outgoing. He was quick to laugh and blend in, making it easier for him to break the ice. As the day unfolded, Sarah met a few girls who seemed friendly enough, but her mind drifted elsewhere. That's when Tom entered her life. He was the kind of boy that commanded attention without even trying, tall, confident, and seemingly untouchable. Every girl seemed to notice him, whispering as he walked by, but Sarah kept her distance. It wasn't that she didn't notice him, she did, but she wasn't like the other girls who fawned over him. She had never been great at expressing her feelings, and besides, she told herself, what was the point? Weeks passed, and Sarah's focus shifted when her brother Matthew started seeing a girl named Jenny. Jenny was sweet, outgoing, and had a charm about her that made Matthew swoon. Sarah found herself roped into helping her brother plan meetups, secretly pleased that Matthew seemed so happy. It was a strange role for her, being the mediator in a relationship she wasn't part of. Still, it made her feel useful in a way she hadn't before. But things took a turn when a group of boys began picking on Sarah. They cornered her one afternoon after class, their sneering faces closing in, making her stomach churn with anxiety. Matthew, ever the protective brother, rushed in to defend her, fists flying in an attempt to drive the boys away. But they outnumbered him 4-1, and the fight quickly escalated. Matthew was getting overwhelmed when, out of nowhere, Tom appeared. With an effortless grace, Tom fought them off. His punches were quick, precise, and far too strong for any normal boy. The bad boys were thrown back as if they weighed nothing, landing in heaps as the crowd looked on in stunned silence. It was over before Sarah could even process it. "Thank you," she murmured to Tom, her voice barely above a whisper, as Matthew pulled himself up from the ground, clearly annoyed. Matthew, always proud, grumbled under his breath, "You should thank me first. I started the fight, not him." "Thanks, Matthew," Sarah replied softly, not wanting to stoke the fire. But Matthew's pride was wounded, and she could see the jealousy simmering beneath the surface. The next day, to her surprise, Tom approached Sarah and asked her out for coffee. She hesitated, her mind racing. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, especially from someone like him. After a long pause, she agreed. Matthew, who overheard the exchange, was visibly displeased. Later that evening, Matthew confronted Sarah. "Tom is trouble," he said, his voice sharp. "He'll use you, then move on to the next girl. That's what guys like him do." "You don't know him," Sarah argued, but the conversation ended in frustration on both sides. A few days later, Matthew got into another fight with the same boys who had bullied Sarah, and this time, he wasn't so lucky. He came home with bruises, his face swollen and scarred. "Why did you do that?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with concern as she dabbed at his wounds with a wet cloth. "You think I can't handle myself?" Matthew spat, wincing under her touch. "That's not the point," she replied softly. As if on cue, Tom appeared, asking, "Who did this to you?" Matthew glared at him, his temper flaring. "Don't try to play the hero, not with me." The tension between them only grew from there. Matthew couldn't let go of his jealousy, and one night, it drove him to do something he could never take back. Matthew wasn't just a protective brother. He had a secret, one that only Sarah knew. He was a werewolf. Born with the ability to shift into a terrifying beast, he had always kept it under control. But that night, consumed by rage and jealousy, Matthew let the wolf out. He transformed and ambushed Tom while he was walking home, his claws tearing into Tom's chest. But just as Matthew thought he had the upper hand, something unthinkable happened. Tom vanished. One moment, he was there, struggling under Matthew's assault, and the next, he was gone without a trace. Matthew searched frantically, but found nothing. The next day, Tom didn't show up to college. Sarah grew worried, questioning Matthew. "Do you know where Tom is?" "Maybe he's busy with other girls," Matthew replied, his tone flippant. But later that evening, as Sarah walked home, she saw Tom waiting for her. Relief washed over her, but her heart sank as he told her what had happened. "A wolf attacked me last night. A werewolf," Tom said, his voice low. "I know it was someone from our college." Sarah's thoughts immediately went to Matthew, but she couldn't bring herself to confess what she suspected. "I'm not sure who it could have been," she lied, her stomach churning with guilt. Days passed, and Matthew's jealousy continued to fester. Then one day, Tom asked Sarah on a proper date. She agreed, despite the uneasy feeling gnawing at her. Matthew, ever watchful, followed them, and when Tom leaned in to kiss Sarah, Matthew lost control. He transformed again, this time attacking not only Tom but Sarah as well in his blind rage. But Tom, to Sarah's utter shock, transformed too. He was also a werewolf, and far more powerful than Matthew. The two fought fiercely, but it was clear Tom was stronger. Matthew shifted back to his human form, defeated, and Tom followed suit. Matthew turned to Sarah, his voice bitter. "Choose, me or him." Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she made the only choice she could. "You're my brother," she whispered. Tom walked away, his figure disappearing into the night. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah never saw Tom again. He had moved on, or so it seemed, and her heart ached with the loss. Matthew tried to comfort her, but the bond between them had been strained. One night, Sarah went out with a friend to a local restaurant with a dance floor, trying to shake the lingering sadness that weighed her down. They were laughing, trying to enjoy themselves, when a group of boys approached, harassing them with vulgar comments. Fear gripped Sarah, and she frantically dialed Matthew's number, but he didn't answer. Just as things began to spiral out of control, a wolf appeared. It wasn't Matthew. This wolf was different, its eyes calm, protective. It quickly took down the harassers, one by one, and then turned to Sarah. For a moment she was terrified, but the wolf simply looked at her, almost tenderly, before slipping away into the night. When Sarah finally reached Matthew on the phone, she realized that the wolf had been Tom all along. He had never truly left her. She rushed outside, hoping to find him, but he was gone, leaving her with nothing but the memory of their brief, beautiful connection. The next day, Sarah learned that the girl Tom had been spending time with was his cousin, not a girlfriend as she had assumed. She sought her out, desperate for answers. "I'm looking for Tom," Sarah said. "Can you please ask him to meet me?" "He won't," the girl replied softly. "He loves you, Sarah, but he believes that being close to you would put you in danger." Sarah's heart broke at those words, but before she could argue, Matthew appeared, urging her to come home. As they walked, she suddenly remembered her family was moving to another city. There was nothing she could do to stop it. And so, Sarah left, leaving behind her college, her friends, and the boy she loved. She never saw Tom again, but she held on to the memory of him, the boy who had protected her, the boy who had loved her and the boy she could never forget. Years later, in quiet moments, Sarah still thought of Tom, wondering what could have been, but life moved forward, and some loves she knew were meant to stay as memories.